Good evening, afternoon, and good morning, depending on what time zone you are all joining us from today. And welcome to this new episode of Digital Meetups as part of the Think Tech initiative for this season of Gamers Without Borders. First, thank you, Al-Anud and Think Tech team, MCIT in general, and also Gamers Without Borders for creating this opportunity for all us to give back something to Saudi Arabia and the community at large. I am EY's digital government practice leader across MENA, Middle East and North Africa, and have the pleasure of moderating this session today. As a quick background, I started my career in the UK government, and after working under 3 different prime ministers, Margaret Thatcher, John Major, and Tony Blair, moved to the private sector, and for the last 7 years have been working for EY MENA. I'm driven by a purpose of making a difference in people's lives, and particularly bringing purpose to digital government. I think of myself as a thought leader in citizen centricity and digital government, and write and speak about reimagining government for the digital era. And my views on what, from a futurist government model perspective, could look like. And I also focus on the digital economy, and that's why I'm here today with you, as gaming is one of the key pillars for the digital economy in Saudi Arabia. Second, welcome to everyone, gamers, video game developers, entrepreneurs, and overall digital community. And thank you all for joining us today. And most importantly, I'd like to give a big welcome to our panel members. We have Dana with us joining from Salt Lake City, and we have David with us from San Francisco. Chandler was about to join us, but may join us later. There's been some challenges with that. So a big thank you to all of them for taking out the time and being with us today, despite their busy schedules. So before kicking off, I want to just very quickly share with you the structure of today, how we're going to run today. We'll start with each panel member first giving a 2-minute brief introduction about themselves and sharing their personal perspective on traditional versus emerging technologies in gaming and their relevant experience in the field. We'll then go to a Q&A session, and I have some questions that I have in mind, which I would like to ask both Dana and David, but I would like yourselves as well to put the questions that you may have in your mind in the chat, and we'll do our best to cover all of them. Also, I encourage each of the panel members to pose questions. Feel free to do that, and also to add on responses of each of the panel members if they feel they wish to contribute further to the discussion. I would very much like this session to be as casual as possible. In fact, a bit like how we are sitting around a coffee table and having a chat. I feel that way we will get the best out of this session. And finally, and at the end, I will ask each of our esteemed panel members to share their closing thoughts before I wrap up and bring the session to a close. So let's get started. As mentioned earlier today, we have, with the privilege of having with us David and Dana, who for me are superstars in their own chosen fields. Collectively, they cover this subject from quite a diverse perspective, whether it's game development, game publishing, game consumption, or associated support services that go along with it. So if I can then kick off, maybe Dana, if I can start with you, if you could take a couple of minutes to please introduce yourself and also give us your perspective on this subject.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction and for the opportunity to speak here today. I'm in awe of all the many different initiatives that are being presented to push forward the industry in Saudi Arabia. So it's really quite wonderful, and I'm grateful for this opportunity. My name is Dana Ware. I am a creative director. I currently am at Dark Slope Studios, which is based out of Canada. And we specialize in family entertainment and theme park activities, multiplayer scenarios for location-based VR as well as at-home VR. We also do virtual production and have been creating a metaverse as well that has an at-home component and a location-based component as well as a broadcast component. And so they're all interconnected with each other. And it's really exciting to be working in a space that's kind of moving and developing the industry in its own specialized way within the metaverse. So that's really exciting as well. I was formerly with The Void, which is a location-based VR company, and was really able to get a lot of specialized training on stage development and location-based entertainment as a whole, which has been incredibly great for my career and like learning specifically about this topic in general, how we use emerging technologies in game development, how we're pushing boundaries forward through VR and AR specifically. So I'm really excited to be here and to share my thoughts.
Thank you, Dana, for that. Much appreciated. And David, if I can ask you to do the same, please, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you, Mohammed. So my name is David Hoppe. I'm the founder and managing partner of Gamma Law in San Francisco. And we are a focused law firm of about now 10 lawyers. And our focus is video games, blockchain, VR, AR, and we also work in digital media. So just a word briefly about my background then. So I've been practicing some 27 years now. The first part of my career was spent in large global law firms based internationally, in Asia as well as Europe, and then in New York City doing financial transactions, joint venture investment, and these sorts of large transactions. I then came out to Silicon Valley and was in-house with an internet media company for a couple of years, and then started my own practice now, this practice, Gamma Law, some 15, 17 years ago. So really almost from the start, the focus of this practice has been video games. And of course, in response to Mohammed's question earlier, I'll just share my perspective from a legal perspective, I guess, on traditional, so-called traditional games versus emerging technology in games. You know, strictly from the contract perspective, when we started doing games work, these were mobile games that were on the mobile carrier stores, the mobile carrier platforms. And so these were agreements with the likes of Verizon, AT&T, et cetera. And this is pre-iPhone and pre-App Store. So these were very thick agreements that required quite a lot of legal work, even though, of course, at the end of the day, the large carriers were not likely to compromise much on any of the terms. But that, of course, all changed very much when we had the App Store and iPhone and then Android, of course. And suddenly, the amount of legal work required to get a game out to millions of people dramatically reduced. And of course, that's been great for the industry. And and as a result of that, from a legal perspective, we find ourselves working on very interesting issues as this industry grows, particularly in the area of licensing of content, say from Hollywood or from other rights holders around the world into games. So that's briefly my background and our practice at Gamma Law. We also do blockchain, as I mentioned, and it's sort of an interesting story because initially our thinking was, and this is a number of years ago now, blockchain, crypto, this is all very interesting. And it's an area that, that we have some potential to contribute in, particularly given our experience in finance. And my partners, a couple of my partners actually also have very good experience in financial work and securities, which of course has become very relevant in the blockchain space. So initially, we conceived as blockchain as an independent focus area, but of course now over the last 2-3 years, we have seen the blockchain practice converge and synergize very much with video games, and so now we represent a number of companies, games companies, that are integrating blockchain models into their gameplay experience, or they have created games that's simply based on blockchain, trading games, collectible games, and the like, sandbox type of games. So it's been exciting. And sorry, to wrap up here, you know, our other focus area, VR and AR, which Dana is certainly, I'm sure, going to contribute a lot in. We've also worked in that space for a number of years, and now we're seeing that converge as well, as we have increasingly this concept of the metaverse getting traction and getting public awareness, and a truly immersive experience in the metaverse, perhaps with a blockchain-based economy with true ownership of digital goods in this space and tradability and a real in-game economy, is very exciting, and it's the sort of thing that drives us here in our practice.
Thank you for that, David. So a lot of very interesting dimensions to explore for the rest of the session today. But let me start, Dana, with yourself, if you don't mind. If you can, from your perspective, looking at emerging technology, some of it you touched, you know, from the lens of a designer and a director, and especially AR and VR, can you elaborate and maybe give us a bit of a perspective on how is that emerging or has been emerging over the last few years, and what do you see as the future?
Sure, yeah. So it's a fascinating thing because this technology is being developed at the same time as we're developing all of these different experiences. And so the two are really kind of going hand in hand and inform each other. There's always something that you're trying to test or push a boundary on when it comes to the tech. You always have to run stress tests to see how much it can handle. You have to test it with users to see how comfortable it is for them to perform certain actions. So you can design something on paper and then finally get it into engine. And once you get people involved in the test play of it, realize that you were completely off, because whatever you designed on paper, the actual hardware has some limitations to it, or vice versa. And so there's a lot of this kind of R&D cycle that's continuously happening as you're designing and directing these experiences. And part of that is extremely exciting for me, because I realize that we're constantly defining a new industry. We're going in and trying to push the boundaries so that we can understand what we're capable of doing and what type of experience we can actually give to an audience. And then those boundaries end up informing the new tech that we end up creating as a result from those tests. So it's all kind of a big cycle that feeds into each other. And it's a really exciting process to be a part of. Definitely part of that whole process is looking at traditional games, seeing what components of traditional games can help to inform the VR or the AR experience, but not letting that dictate the new experience. I often see people try to shove in some theory from traditional games into VR or AR platforms, and it doesn't work. People don't respond well to it, or sometimes it does, and very often it does, but there's times where it doesn't. For example, UI and UX kind of experiences, it's really hard to translate some of these theories from traditional games. Like, we have many years of documentation and examples of how it was implemented, psychology on how people respond to it, and we understand that workflow and understand the usability for traditional games. But in VR and AR, we're still defining it. We're still uncovering what it is that needs to occur moment by moment in order for somebody to really fully understand what you're trying to have them do, or an action that you want them to perform. So it's constantly evolving, which is really exciting. And it's a really interesting kind of opportunity to start integrating other parts of technology that, for example, like smart props potentially, or sensory effects on a stage, all of these different components can be added in, but it does take some time to do that initial testing and kind of make sure that it will work properly as well.
That's very interesting indeed. And just if I can build on one of the things you mentioned, which is about the fusion between trying to take old games and create the versions of those old games, or to fuse them with new ideas. What you seem to be suggesting is that when you try to take these old games and try to just emulate them in the digital space, it doesn't work so well. So you need to maybe reimagine or build games that are, maybe the essence are there, but they're built for this other platform, which we consider as digital. Is that what you were alluding to?
Yeah. Mm-hmm, exactly. And it might not be a one-for-one exactly transition of, we have this traditional game and we would just want to port it over to VR, even though I have seen that happen. And you're like, this is really nauseating because none of it was built for VR. So I have seen people attempt to do that, which I would never recommend that. But it's more so also the principles of, oh, well, this has always worked forever in traditional format. Why are we questioning it in VR? And you're like, well, because this is a completely different way that we're asking people to interact with this character or this UI or to do this specific type of mechanic. And so it's not always going to translate one for one. And I think that that's like the interesting discovery of it, is understanding some of these principles, understanding them for what they are and where they were built, and then helping them to inform, but not to dictate what you're going to do as you move forward. So yeah, like I said, one-for-one translations never work. They just don't. So that kind of expectation, I think, is something that people have a hard time with when they first get into this field. They think it's going to translate exactly, and it just doesn't.
Understood. David, coming to yourself, I just, is there any, first of all, on this particular question, is there anything that you want to add to what Dana has said?
Well, sure. So actually what Dana has said, it sums up also very well how the legal regime translates or doesn't translate from a kind of so-called traditional type of environment into, let's say, a virtual environment or an immersive environment. And courts around the world have, to date, they have tried to apply sort of real world, let's say, physical world analogies from existing law to see how existing law should apply in a digital space. And, you know, to be honest, it usually works, but it doesn't always work. You know, one example that comes to mind is, and this is a number of years now, but you know, when the question arose under trademark law as to whether Google or other search engines can sell people's companies' trademarked names to use as you know, to generate advertisements for other companies, right? So obviously, if you type in, you know, XYZ product, what you're going to see at the top of the screen is you're going to see competing products to XYZ product in the first 2 or 3 entries in the advertising section. And then below that, presumably you'll see XYZ product's own website. So, you know, I think that there was a legitimate kind of objection to that among a lot of companies that said, you know, we have built this brand, we've spent hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars to build awareness of this brand. And now this intermediary, this search engine, is selling our trademark, our huge investment. They are leveraging that to generate advertising revenue for the benefit of our competitors. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, intuitively, I think there's a lot of, you know, I can certainly appreciate that argument. But so what courts did is they applied a traditional analogy to a traditional store. And they said, okay, well, if you go into a store and you say, you know, I want to buy XYZ product, what aisle will I find that in? And the store clerk says, well, let me take you over to aisle 5, and here's the XYZ products, but here's also the ABC products. And, you know, a lot of people, you know, really like these ABC products. So it's kind of, you know, it's interesting because I think that sort of scenario to me doesn't seem quite so objectionable as the scenario that the courts ultimately have upheld, certainly in the United States, which said that yeah, an advertising company, a search engine, can essentially piggyback off of the investment that you have made in your trademark to allow other competitors to advertise their product. By now, it's, you know, it's just unquestioned law, at least in the United States. So that's an example. And as I say, in many or most cases, it kind of does make sense, and it helps to simplify things if we do take an analogy from you know, from the physical world and from so-called traditional legal principles. But in many cases, it just doesn't quite translate.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. And I suspect that this is going to be an area that will remain fluid for some years to come as this whole industry evolves. Similar to other industries which took hundreds of years to get to the point where we are, and the case law and practices around there have matured. This has a long way to go. David, one of the questions I had in mind was about when we look at this gaming in specific, you know, it's kind of unlocking a huge amount of possibilities, and emerging technologies at the center of that. In your experience, and you are dealing with a lot of organizations who are either at, I would imagine, at the kind of cutting edge of this, leveraging emerging technologies for this space, whether it's media, music, or currencies and gaming. Can you shed some light on what are the kind of things coming up or potentially coming up in the future, of course, without breaking any confidentiality?
Well, I think that, you know, what we are seeing from our clients is a lot of interest and a lot of investment being made in blockchain technology. And we're seeing that not just in the ways you might expect in terms of, you know, let's say, you know, crypto trading strategies and structures and decentralized, you know, methods of you know, of managing financial transactions, et cetera. But, you know, we're seeing this increasingly overlap with the content space, and, you know, how artists are able to take advantage of the increase in value of their works, even after their works are sold, and to obtain some sort of revenue from secondary trading of their works. We're seeing scenarios in which physical assets are being tied to tokens, and let's say it's, you know, a physical world piece of art, and are being traded with the token. So I think that you know, as well as, you know, the variety of means that have been discussed for some time with respect to blockchain in terms of, let's say, you know, managing corporate shares and corporate shareholders, and simplifying trading and reducing the cost of managing shareholders, and you know, real estate, for example. We have clients in a variety of areas, again, traditional areas in which there's great opportunities for blockchain to reduce costs and increase verifiability.
Yeah, those two things in particular, and especially the verifiability, I think is going to be the key of a lot of this going forward. Dana, any question that you have in mind, maybe you want to put on the table for David before I go into some of the other questions I have in mind?
So much of what he's talking about is really fascinating to me because, you know, there starts to become that question of understanding ownership within the metaverse. I mean, these are like things that are like floating around my head constantly of like, I wonder, you know, how does this play out as like a larger ecosystem, and what are legal implications of somebody trying to steal somebody else's like tokens. And you know, we haven't seen all of this like play out quite yet, and so we don't know exactly what type of like sentence you could get or like legal fee that would be associated with that type of behavior. But I'm just curious if any of that stuff is kind of in your mind. And in addition to that, you know, I also think about like minors within this space and like how minors apply to engaging within these metaverse systems or just within VR and AR platforms and at-home content as well. I feel like that section of the industry is something that we as creators like don't have like a very strong hold on what exactly is happening, and it seems like it's currently just shifting constantly. For a long time at the beginning of VR, it was completely frowned upon to put any child in a headset ever at all. It was like a no-go. You can't do that because we didn't understand the brain development or how the eyes would relate to what they were seeing and psychology of the child as well. And some of that has shifted over the years. And so I feel like it's the same space right now with some of these other topics of conversation. So I'm just kind of curious, as those are two different topics, but I have a lot of things I want to ask him. So.
Well, there's a lot of questions there for David, but before we go there with that, you mentioned Metaverse, and David mentioned this as well. For our audiences who may not understand what that means, maybe, you know, if you can give a bit of a introduction to Metaverse.
That should be a Dana, I think. I could take it, but yeah.
Dana, if you don't mind, just a quick, in layman terms, so our audience, if they are not so digitally inclined, they can understand.
Sure. So I will preface this with, it feels like everybody has a different definition because it is being defined and created in real time. So don't hold me to every aspect of this because it may not be applicable to every company, but everyone is kind of defining what this space looks like as far as being able to engage in content that might be like an at-home platform, might be another reality that is being developed that then has cross-platform opportunities as well. For us in particular, we're still currently defining all of the different components that we have involved with it. But for us, it involves at-home entertainment, location-based entertainment, as well as broadcasting entertainment, and how people can engage on those different platforms in one kind of simultaneous coherent experience. And so they all kind of tie back to each other in a way. And it's, like I said, very complicated to describe because I don't feel like there's one definition that defines it for everyone in every company and the way that it's being used.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And at least, you know, as we all know, it's also emerging in itself. It's not fully formed, and it will continue to evolve and adapt and probably change as it goes along. What we think about it today and what it will be in 10 years' time, it will probably be very different. So, David, coming to you, a lot of questions that came from Dana, maybe not all of them, but if you can pick one or two to just reflect on.
Sure. So one thing that's very interesting that Dana mentioned is the consequences of actions in a virtual world that affect other people, let's say. So in the real world, that could take two forms. It could take the form of criminal liability, which of course means, the state, the government has taken action against you and could result in your imprisonment, let's say, or fines. And the second action it could take would be civil liability, right? So other individuals, the individual that you have injured or allegedly injured, can compel you to answer to or explain what you've done, and then an independent fact finder decides whether or not which of the two of you is telling the truth and what injury there has been, if any, and what the consequence is. So, if we're talking about a virtual world, let's say there's a theft. Let's say there is a creative work that was being displayed in someone's private space in the virtual world, and this metaverse, and somehow this other party is able to enter that virtual space and to remove that creative work, and perhaps now he is displaying that in his own space. Or perhaps he has actually entirely removed it from the environment and traded it and sold it on a secondary exchange for non-fungible tokens. What happens then? So if we apply the current real world template, we could have criminal liability, we could have civil liability. Criminal liability, of course, ordinarily requires some kind of a governmental authority acting through courts and police. So this is something that I've speculated on in the past. Is it possible that we can wind up, because of course there are a variety of metaverses that are being developed, and I'm sure perhaps at some point in the future there's going to be a sort of connection of these various metaverses of some way, some tunnel perhaps that will connect, let's say it's the Facebook universe, with the Google metaverse. Although my guess is that it's probably not going to be these big incumbents that are successful in this space in the long term. But in any event, are we going to have in the Facebook metaverse? Are we going to have a sort of Facebook criminal code? In the Google metaverse, are we going to have a Google criminal code? Is it going to be maybe similar to states in the United States, each of which has its own, comprehensive criminal statutes? And if so, who is the governing authority, and who is making the decisions, and who's the judge, right? So, and then at the same time, let's say that Facebook judge decides not to take any action, and you're the victim. What's your recourse? Do you have some sort of ability to bring a lawsuit in that metaverse against the individual who has caused harm to you? And if so, what's the venue? Who's the fact finder? Who's the judge? So these are very interesting questions. I mean, I think if I had to speculate, I would say that it's very likely, at least in some metaverse situations, we're going to have professional judges, arbitrators. I mean, that's what we have in the real world. Outside of the court system, we have, at least in the United States, we have arbitrators, right? And these are private individuals. Very often they're, experienced lawyers or retired judges who are generally paid very well to adjudicate private disputes outside of the court system. So it could very well be that as specialties and trades develop in these virtual worlds, that we have a class developing of professional judges, arbitrators, and they will, be presented with the evidence, and they will make a decision, and perhaps they can render some kind of a verdict, some kind of a decision, an award. The question, though, is what enforcement authority will these individuals have, right? So in order for them to, let's say in our example, cause that virtual artwork to be returned to its owner or damages to be paid, they will have to have some kind of authority rendered on them by the community, by the platform. And, you know, when we get to this stage, we have a really quite a highly sophisticated social order that is developing. So it's quite exciting to think that, you know, that this could be not too far off in the future, where we have this arbitrator who was selected with the agreement of both of these parties, who has the ability to either transfer ownership of an item within the virtual space from one citizen to another citizen, or to require the citizen that caused the damage to you know, to pay some amount of compensation. Perhaps that's some kind of a you know, in-game currency wallet, and both parties have to pledge some amount of money. They have to put up some kind of bond in order to start the proceedings. So very interesting stuff, and we could talk about it quite a long time.
Yeah, fascinating, because it's a parallel universe to what we live in, the physical, and you know, something which potentially you're talking about becoming self-regulating, self-governing, self-policing and self-enforcing. And to some extent, it's kind of happening if you think about it, but maybe at a very low level, where people maybe their membership is cancelled and they no longer are a Facebook or a member of that particular platform because of certain behaviors they have exhibited, and the rules were violated. And that's one part of it. The other obviously is towards enforcement of any kind of penalties on them beyond that. So quite interesting. I have.
So sorry, Mohammed. Sorry, if I could just interrupt.
Yeah.
What you've just said now is absolutely true, of course. But it's the old world. It's the authoritarian state model of of the internet and of each of these platforms, which
right.
is what makes this all very exciting, is that we have the opportunity to move beyond that now.
Right.
To have true
yes.
ownership and to have true freedom, and with that comes potentially true consequences.
Absolutely, and one which is cross borders, not defined by any particular country borders, which is a fascinating part of this and how we achieve that.
Yeah.
We have a question.
Please go ahead. It's okay. I just wanted to jump in on that specific note, because this is actually a conversation I was having with some individuals that I know who, it was an international kind of group of people. And we were talking about whose culture defines it in the end. Who's the person that sets the rules? Who, like, we come from all these different backgrounds, and the way that we socially engage within these virtual spaces, to, you know, sometimes for me, I feel like I'm being attacked, and sometimes, you know, as a female gamer, that quite often happens, you know, but that might be a social normal for somebody else, right? And so there's this constant duality of trying to understand who is going to define that culture within that space, because it hasn't really been defined quite yet. The laws, like, we have a cancel culture that we kind of use as a method to, like, force somebody out, right? But that's not really sustainable. It's not a sustainable model, and we're not necessarily emulating or teaching the type of behavior that we want to cultivate within those spaces. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's, like, really important, especially like as a creator, to be engaged in these conversations and to talk to people like David about how do we design and create a space that can help facilitate the type of behavior and culture that we want to encourage, that we want to see flourish within the, and usually it's, you know, we want to create safe spaces for people to be able to have engagement in the, and feel like they want to continuously come back, right? So it's a big question, and I think it's going to take everyone with all of their different expertise to come together to figure out how to do it in a cohesive way, and not so much I'm going to design the thing and then you deal with the consequences and you figure out how to fix my problems after, right? That's not the way that we're going to solve this issue. It's going to be a collective, a lot of different diverse backgrounds coming together to figure out how to do it in a unified unit with a singular voice and vision as well.
Yeah, I think the key there, which I took away, is a new cultural norm has to emerge, you know, which is cross-bound borders. It's not about how we are in a particular country, particular place in the world. It's about in that metaverse or the virtual space, how do we behave and what's the right norms from a cultural perspective that break through country borders, basically, to have a unified model. I'm going to take a question from a gentleman who has, Abdul Rahman has posted something. I'll read it out and either one of you can pick on it and then build. I just have a question. Why is cross progress and cross play so hard to implement? So I don't know if you want to kick it off, Dana.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's a really big question. Part of why from my perspective, it's hard to implement is because you have all these different entities that are trying to build for their platform, right? And everyone has a special reason for why their platform is better than everybody else's. And so they don't necessarily always communicate with each other or want to facilitate that type of cross-play activity, but you see it happen a lot more often currently than you have in the past. And I think that is only going to be more encouraged as these type of virtual spaces like metaverses are created, because my hope and my goal is that this metaverse scenario is going to help build a model for a new way of being able to engage with people from different countries and people across different platforms. So I feel like it's going to help facilitate some of that, but that's my wishful thinking probably in some ways too. As an active developer in the space, like it's definitely on the forefront of my mind, but it's going to take a lot of collaboration again, just the same as we were speaking about earlier. People have to come together and have a singular vision for what that looks like. So cross-platform is one of those things. It's going to have to be people working together to build a larger ecosystem.
Yeah. David, anything to add on that?
Well, I would just say from a legal perspective, this is sort of the Holy Grail, let's say, of true ownership of in-game assets, of blockchain, the potential that blockchain offers us. To be able, and there's a number of very interesting companies that are working on this, but the ability to take a sword, let's say, that's purchased in one game and to use it in that game and then decide, you know what, maybe my avatar in the other game could benefit from the sword as well, and migrate, take that virtual item from one platform, move it to another platform. So obviously, as Dana's just said, most of the challenge there, and it's a very big challenge, is in getting cooperation among the different platforms. But there's interesting legal issues that arise as well in terms of, coordination of terms of service. I mean, no one really wants to think about terms of service, let alone read them, or privacy policies. But all these sorts of things will have to be thought through and coordinated if we're going to have true ownership of assets within game environments and the ability to take them from one platform to another.
Yeah, and quite interesting if it does become possible, because you can see, so many interesting elements in one particular game that you feel, if I had it here, I would be able to, benefit from that. So a very interesting, in the real world, obviously it's quite simple, we can hand it over, but in the metaverse or the virtual world, it becomes quite challenging and interesting legally, but also practically. Dana, about your organization, Darkstroke, can you share some examples of experiences that they have produced in interactive entertainment? It would be interesting to hear some live experiences.
Yeah, sure. So currently working on a whole slate of stuff that I can't talk about because it's under NDA, but engaging with a lot of very large IPs that everyone knows all around the world. So it's really exciting. New platform development stuff as well. So that for us, like entertainment-based, location-based type of entertainment is really kind of the heart of a lot of the stuff we do. We have Scary Girl, which is an experience that's with zero latency, and it's at, I believe, over 40 locations. So it's a location-based experience as well. And Slugterra, which is also at the Hologate, which I believe is like over 250 maybe locations, about that. And those different experiences are VR multiplayer experiences where you can go in and have a really immersive opportunity to play and engage with this content. Slugterra is, for those who don't know, it's a TV IP, so it's a television show, and basically taking all of the magical things of that IP and thinking about player fantasies of that IP and then infusing that into the game is really kind of the central part of the VR experience, and letting you be in that world, be with those characters, and just kind of have fun with all of the cool abilities that they have in the IP that you now get to have too. And so it just trying to make it a little bit more dynamic and draw in the already existing fans and introduce people who don't know about the show to the actual content as well. So we have a lot of that type of stuff happening, as well as we have like a virtual production aspect of our company as well. So doing a lot of TV production.
Very exciting and interesting indeed. And I think David, myself, and I'm sure David also is probably quite excited and interested to see how a lot of this will pan out. David, any question from your side for Dana?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I actually was just trying to think about how I was going to get in a question to Dana. So, I personally have just been like so amazed by the experience that is enabled in the location-based scenarios. And obviously those businesses have been hit very hard over the last year and a half. And I know that there has been some effort to, at least in some of these, to bring those back. And now that people, at least in the United States, many parts of the U.S. Are very actively, almost trying to make up for the last 18 months by going out and flying here and flying there, so I'm just wondering what your feeling is about the return of location-based entertainment, and how long you feel it might take to recover the time and investment that's been lost here because of COVID.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, because yes, the industry was heavily affected by COVID. I formerly was with The Void. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we had to close, all our locations shut down. And that was really hard. It was a moment in time where I was speaking to a lot of different companies, huge companies, about some of their LBE opportunities and what they were looking towards. And a lot of them were just scared, to be honest. Like, most of them didn't know what was going to happen to the space, if there was going to be any opportunities, or if people were going to want to engage in this content, or when they would be able to engage in this content. So there was a lot of doubt at that moment in time. So I'm talking like, over a year. What has been? Yeah, it's been over a year at this point. Over a year ago. There was a lot of like questioning and doubts and stuff like that happening, but that's all changed. And I want to say, just within the last 6 months, it's changed quite significantly. I was fortunate to be able to work on LBE VR throughout the entire pandemic, which isn't necessarily the case for everyone, but there are a lot of companies who are still going strong. Some companies that are getting ready to announce new things. I was just at a conference with with the people that make Holodeck, which is Major Mega, and they have like a whole new platform that they're going to be releasing at some point here. And their Hyperdeck platform is absolutely, it just blows your mind. It's very immersive, multi-platform kind of scenario, as well as those other two companies I was speaking about earlier. So Zero Latency and Hologate both have a lot of initiatives that they're working towards. They're pushing a lot of content forward. They're developing new stuff currently. VR Studios is another company that's also working within the location-based space that's pushing things and pushing boundaries as well. So it's really exciting to see the stuff that's coming up, and getting ready to be released on the slate for audiences, I think it's going to draw people out of their homes. I think they're going to want to engage in this content. And like you said, people are like, they're ready to travel. They're ready to go out of their house and do these social experiences, which is what these platforms really facilitate, right? It's a social experience. When you go to a theme park, you go to have a social experience with your friends. This is the mini version of that. Go engage with your friends in this content that you probably already know and love the IP. It's just an extension of that play, an extension of that player fantasy. And so I think it's like, I fully think that people are going to be ready to engage in this content. And some of these locations are open now. So people are actively engaging with them already. So yeah, I'm very, very excited, very hopeful for what it looks like. Some of the projects I'm working on will release in November. And so excited to see how those go into the market and how people respond to them. So I'm very hopeful, as you can tell, about what's going to happen.
So I think both of us are going to make a queue to Lake City to try and experience the new things that are coming up. Definitely, and I echo the sentiment that because we've been locked down for such a period of time, really we wanted to get out there and experience beyond what we've been doing at home, which has been great, but we've missed out on a lot of these social elements. I'm going to dedicate the last 9 minutes. We'll try and wrap up in the next 9 minutes or so. So want to try and explore now from a very particular angle, which is potential entrepreneurs, people who are interested in entering this field. They either are an innovator and want to come, explore this further, or they've already created something and they want to try and make this into a business. So your thoughts first, Dana, on this, some messages, some key things, if the entrepreneurs of tomorrow or today are listening to you, what would you have to say to them?
I would say, don't be afraid to push boundaries. Don't be afraid to go and try to engage with a technology that nobody else has made yet, because that is what's going to really bring the magical elements of surprise to people and audiences. It's engaging in stuff that's new and creative and different, and it, again, is pushing those boundaries. Don't be afraid to do it. And people are excited about the things that you're passionate about. So if you're passionate about something that might seem a little crazy at first, keep pushing in it, prove it out, test it, build a prototype. Find some people that are going to support you, whether that's friends or an investor. And if you want to come at it from a different angle and you want to come in as an operator, there's tons of platforms that are out there that you can purchase already. It's a turnkey solution. You can buy one of these hyperdecks or something and like put it into your location, and that's a way to engage as well, right? So it's not a limited opportunity. There's so many different ways to come into this space, whether you're a content creator or you're somebody who is just dabbling in the metaverse potentially. There's an artist, like artists are like making so much money off of NFTs, like there's ways to engage, but take the risk and try it and see how it works for you. Would be my only thing to say is, don't believe people if they don't see your vision, because your vision is your vision, and you'll find people who will support you.
Absolutely, and I think great advice indeed. Don't let other people hold you back. Try it out, fail yourself. At least you don't feel that you didn't try it and you could have done it 10 years ago or 15 years ago. David, particularly from a legal perspective, but any other angles you want to cover on this, someone looking to come into this field as an entrepreneur, what would be your advice, messages to them?
So we actually support a number of startup companies, and some of them have become quite successful. Our first client just last week completed their IPO in Hong Kong, and we're very excited for them. And we're working with a number of very interesting companies who are really at the very early stage. And this is one of the fun aspects of our practice. So, what I can speak to, I guess, is the process of obtaining financing, which typically, unless there's some independent source of funds, typically comes along, fairly early in the process. And I would, the advice I guess that I would offer is build your network in the space, and as early on as you can, begin attending conferences and events. And it's not necessarily about selling, some kind of concept that you have. It's about gaining credibility and expanding, developing a broad base of people that in the industry, who you can go to when the time is right, and express a real interest in what they are doing, and share with them, what you're considering, and or what you have started to do as well. Ultimately, in any aspect, and this is something that I certainly underestimated quite a lot early in my career and in my education as well, was the value of this network of individuals that are going to go through this path with you, and certainly the network of people in the industry who can offer advice, who can connect you potentially with financing sources, and maybe down the road with companies that may be interested in partnering or even acquiring your company. These are all really, really critical things. And the greatest idea, the greatest concept, the greatest game, unfortunately, is not likely to advance very much without the support of a great number of people.
Absolutely, and good, solid advice as well. If I would look at now from a perspective of Saudi Arabia, and they are trying to build their digital economy, and one of the focused pillars is gaming and esports. Any lessons that you have learned and ideas from working around the world with different organizations in different countries that you feel the government could be thinking about, maybe embracing to really accelerate the development of their economy?
So we do quite a bit in esports, and we do it in different countries, and we have seen different approaches that have been taken or not taken with respect to regulation of this space. In at least one country that we do a lot of work in, there is a licensing regime that's been implemented because of anti-gambling regulations, and the scenario in which an individual is paying an entry fee for the opportunity to win a prize often can raise legal questions in various jurisdictions. We've seen this in at least one country where we do quite a lot of work, this licensing, esports professional licensing system that has been implemented, which was a way that kind of partially solved the problem, but also, as you might imagine, raises other questions and complications. So, I would say from a legal perspective, the principal issue that we encounter, there's two really principal issues we encounter in the case of esports. One is immigration, actually. Quite a simple thing, but in order to build this ecosystem, you need to have these tournaments that cross national borders, and you need for the celebrities, the athletes, the esports professionals that attract lots of attention and interest, you need them to be able to attend these events. So immigration is one issue, and with that goes, similar to what I was just saying, this concept of esports professionals as being entitled to equal treatment as other sort of experts in their field, professional athletes in traditional sports, let's say. So that's something that a number of countries now have actually recognized, and a number of other countries have not yet taken that step. So So much of esports becoming legitimized and being able to be successful without overregulation and without regulatory challenges is obtaining a sort of legitimacy, first of all, in the mainstream, and hopefully that's reflected in the regulation.
So a good balance that needs to be established that doesn't kill the initiative, but at the same time protects the rights of people and avoids any complications from a legal perspective. Dana, from your side, anything that you would like to share that you think at the governmental level they should be thinking about?
Yeah, I maybe this is like the wrong perspective or not the perspective exactly that you're looking for, but I think encouraging those young players to engage in the space by setting up some type of scholarship, potentially esports scholarship, so that people can start to recognize it as a real actual value to the country and to the global platform as a whole. I mean, we're barely struggling to do that in the United States, right? Like we're just defining and trying to encourage those things. And I think that Gamers Without Borders, for example, is really pushing that initiative forward. So the infrastructure there seems like it's almost it's already on the forefront, and that's amazing. So as much as you can encourage like the youth to see that there's more than the traditional routes of education or the traditional routes of having a profession, that you can become a professional esports gamer. Like that's a real thing. You could go to school and get an actual scholarship for that. Like that's a real thing. Like, and like I said, I think you guys are already doing it. And I wish that the rest of the world could kind of model off of that a little bit more as well. But as much as you can encourage that, I just admire it. And I think that it's exactly what needs to happen for the youth to feel like there's opportunities for them as well. Oh, I was also going to say, so for anyone who is coming into this space or already is a developer, GDC is next week as well. And that's a massive conference specifically for game developers. And so that's another opportunity to really kind of dip your toes into the space, learn, engage, network, just like David was talking about. So I think that there's a lot of different types of nonprofits and organizations out there that would love to support and help, and trying to get everyone to work together again is probably part of the key.
Great, thank you for that. So let's bring the session to a close. It's been really a great conversation for me. I've learned a lot and picked up a lot, I'm sure the audience as well. So as we go to wrapping up, if I can ask both of you to give your parting remarks, please. What would you like to share as your closing thoughts? So if I can start with yourself, David, please.
Sure. Thank you again, Mohammed, for this great session. Very interesting and, of course, a great topic. So from my perspective, from the legal perspective, there's so much potential, and, there's so much, I think, that so many exciting opportunities that are ahead. And my hope is that, the regulators, the legislators around the world will develop an awareness of the space and the value of what so many people here are doing in terms of building communities in a digital space. And we need to have people who are developing the rules that understand what is happening here and what the potential is 5, 10, 20 years down the road. And unfortunately, certainly in the United States anyway, this is not common. So my hope is that, legislators and regulators around the world will, perhaps through the influence of their children and grandchildren, will develop an appreciation, understanding of all the exciting things that are happening here, and develop ways to manage this space without impeding the growth.
Thank you for that, David. Much appreciated. Dana, your parting thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to again say thank you so much for having me on and to be able to share these thoughts. Thank you, Mohammed, for all these very insightful questions and for participating in this talk and facilitating it the way that you have. It's very, it's been very great. I guess, like, from my perspective, I just want to, you know, as a content developer, as a content creator, somebody that's engaging in emerging technology, I just want to again say, just follow your dreams, go for it. You can make games and make a living. You can make games and start companies. You can try to bring people into your vision, even if it's hasn't been made yet. You can make it. You can be that person. You can do it. And I just want to also, like, say that there's an ecosystem that's ready to support you too. And your voice matters and your talent matters. And I can't wait to see what you make, basically. So thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Dana. It's really interesting thoughts, both from yourself and David at the end. And I must say that it's such an exciting and interesting area. And I'm for one, looking forward to seeing what the future holds for AR, VR, and XR in particular, how all of these things are going to merge in the future, and how the hybrid models will evolve between the physical and the virtual space itself. So let me thank Alud, plus the Think Tech team, and MCIT in general, and Gamers Without Borders, for creating this opportunity for all of us really to contribute. And a big thank you to the audience of joining us today. We really appreciate you being here with us, and I'm hoping that you have taken away with you some interesting insights, at least I have for sure taken away from the conversation we had today. And a big thank you to you, Dana and David. Thank you for sharing so many amazing insights, and I wish you a great day ahead, and hopefully we will have you again with us sometime in the future. With that, I'd like to bring this to a close. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.